Welcome to a masterclass of the Goode Intelligence Digital Trust World 2021. My name is Alan Goode, CEO and Chief Analyst at Goode Intelligence, and I shall be your host for today's masterclass. This masterclass is on digital identity and is in partnership with Digital Trust Networks. I'm joined by Ramesh Kasanapalli, CEO, Digital Trust Networks, co-founder of the ADI Association and founder of the FIDO Alliance. Thank you, Ramesh.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak about digital identity. So, like Alan introduced, I'm Ramesh Kasanapalli. I'm currently the founder and CEO of Digital Trust Networks, also co-founder of a nonprofit organization called ADI Association, which stands for Accountable Digital Identity, and also as the founder of FIDO Alliance before this, and not to mention Knock Knock Labs. So we are in a very different world now, and digital identity is coming into the front and center because of various things that are happening in the digital world. The COVID actually expedited and precipitated the need for a stronger digital identity, because the world now has completely shifted. Although we were in a transition over last few years, COVID actually has expedited exponentially, where our digital world has become our real world. Earlier we have digital world, it has its own problems, and now because most of the effects that are happening, or most of the dealings that are happening now, have completely shifted to digital world, it is extremely important that on both ends of the chain, the people know each other, who they are dealing with, in a very, very assertive way, and also be able to hold each other accountable, which has been missing in the industry. Adding to the online fraud, which was conventional fraud, which we all know over the years, last 4 or 5 years, even before COVID, and COVID again exacerbated the problem, was the disinformation. You guys have seen what's happening in the arena of misinformation and disinformation, where unlike the online fraud, where it is financial related, the disinformation, misinformation is causing societal damage. It's cutting to the core of our very living, where what can we trust, what cannot we trust? A simple thing like a COVID vaccine also has become a political thing, an opinionated thing, when science tells black and white what it is. And all of us know what happened to the disinformation, misinformation, the effects it caused on the, for instance, elections in 2016, 2020, and the other parts of the world that's happening right now. When we started Accountable Digital Identity a year and a half ago, we wanted to actually see, what's causing this problem, whether it is disinformation, misinformation, or it is online fraud. Let's not see the symptoms of what the problem, what's causing, and try to treat the symptoms. Let's go back and actually fix the disease itself. What is the main problem? Why the online fraud and the identity problem is happening? So when we took a look at it from 100,000-foot level and tried to understand the root problem of digital identity and the digital world, as it stands today, instead of thinking incrementally in evolution fashion, we completely took ourselves out of the box and started looking at it. But when we are looking at it, we also considered the number of initiatives that are happening and the fantastic work that's being done in various standards bodies. And we don't want to reinvent anything. There is no point reinventing anything when some work has already been done. Our aim is to just enhance and embrace it and enhance it. That's simple. So where we started was what's causing the root problem for this digital identity to be in such a broken state. Majority of the fraud or majority of the havoc that we are trying to see that we are seeing on the digital world, may that be distrust or the online fraud, financial fraud that's happening. It is directly related to three issues, just three issues. First one is identity theft. Somebody stole your credentials. Unfortunately, we are still in credential-oriented infrastructure. Somebody stole your credentials and they become you. That's first problem. Second problem, somebody is trying to fake their own identity to something that doesn't exist. Like Ramesh, last name, let's say, some crazy thing. That person does not exist, but I go create a profile or persona calling Ramesh Stephenson. I'm just giving an example. Now, somebody will give me that account online because they don't do vetting on me. Now, there will be 25 other sites which will come back and say, log in with that. So then 25 different sites think that I'm Ramesh Stephenson. That's the problem. That's the world we are in right now. Now, Ramesh Stephenson goes online and he creates a lot of disinformation, misinformation, creates havoc. And that gets retweeted, reshared, etc., etc. Last problem we felt was the personal data theft. We all are asked for 10 standard questions of each one of us pick 3. Where did you meet your spouse first time? What is your first car? Who is your best friend in your school? So there are standard 10 or 15 questions, out of which 3 of them we each one of us choose. And there are at least 10 people who know those information about us. In addition to that, that information is available on various data consolidation sites. If they get breached up, our personal information is up for sale. And also, we go leave our information in multiple places indiscriminately. And that becomes the target, and they can just go and take over our accounts, create accounts using our information, and do whatever they need to do. So when we wanted to fix it, between these 3, majority of the fraud is there. So how to fix this problem? Like I was mentioning earlier, our digital world has become our real world now. So what is missing in the digital world that is there in the real world that's causing this problem? So what we felt was, well, in the digital world, just like in the real world, while security and privacy are fundamental rights of the user, which we strongly believe, that needs to be balanced with trust and accountability. If you don't do that, then you will continue to perpetuate the problem that we are in right now without fixing the root cause. So that's why our ADI vision is, yes, security and privacy are fundamental rights of the user, but bring in trust and accountability to complement that. Now you will have a good, decent society and online world that everybody can, really have a good interactions with whoever they are trying to deal with. We have come a long way in the last 30 years where we treated internet infrastructure as an account-oriented infrastructure. And each one of us have 30, 40, like it says, on an average about 90 accounts. And we have, progressed calling security and privacy, adding more and more to security and privacy, creating anonymity for the user. And then we call, zero trust, and then we do 50 other things to actually know who you are behind the scenes with all kinds of signals and risk systems, and just, to find out who you are. And because that's based on account-oriented information, account-oriented infrastructure. Now it's time to actually change the infrastructure from an account-oriented infrastructure to an identity-oriented infrastructure. Let there be an identity of a person, not an account. From the identity, you make sure that the identity can be created and issued to a specific person in a certain way, and let that infrastructure be identity-oriented infrastructure. That way you can actually, you may not know anything about the person, but once you're interacting, should there be a problem, you should be able to hold him accountable by using the infrastructure and the specifications that we're going to provide to ADI. So what we felt was, how does that stuff happen in the real world, the identity? Why don't we do the similar thing in the digital world or emulate what we have done in the real world, in the digital world, to bring that identity-oriented infrastructure? If you see our real world, our identities are not actually created by us. Our identities are created by a trusted group of people, and they were given to us. Like, for instance, when I was born, my mother and father said, my son is going to be called Ramesh, and he's going to inherit my last name, Kesanupalli. And the doctor came and said that, okay, this is the birth characteristics of Ramesh Kesanupalli. And the government came out and issued a birth certificate and created, quote unquote, I call core identity of me. When that core identity was created and given to me, after that, that identity was neither owned by my parents or by the doctor or by the government. It is me. If anything happens to that core identity DNA or core identity characteristic, I'm the guy who is held accountable. My social security number would be issued based on that core identity. My passport will be issued based on that core identity. If I win a lottery with that DNA or with that characteristic, I get that money. If there is some fraud that happens, I will be held accountable. That's how the real world works. I take the birth certificate, I go to elementary school, I say this is Ramesh Kesanupalli, and they will enroll me and give me an elementary school identity. Then I take that to go to high school, college, university, workplace. Everywhere I go, I carry that core identity. And each place that I go to, they issue something to that core identity, certifying that that belongs to me, that diploma that I earned in that school, and salary that I'm getting every 2 weeks, the car that I purchased, house that I purchased, every one of those credentials or something that proves that that belongs to me is issued to this core identity. That's the real world. That's why in the real world, anything and everything happens to that identity, there is a human behind it. That human will be held accountable. Why can't we do very similar thing in digital trust, where we create an identity-oriented infrastructure, where we bring people into this ecosystem with that kind of birth certificate or digital birth certificate, or in our terminology, we call it digital address. Why don't we create a digital address for every user that is actually created by a trusted issuer? It is not willy-nilly created. It's not like somebody downloads a wallet and creates identity. No, you will be onboarded by a trusted issuer. The way he onboards you onto the ecosystem is creating a unique key for you that are dependent on your attributes that can only be created specific to you. A cryptographic representation of you, if I may say. A cryptographic representation of you, a cryptographic key should be created, for you, for your characteristics, and then deliver that key to the user and bind it with FIDO. That way, only you can claim it. So in this model, a cryptographic representation, a so-and-so called digital birth certificate, we cannot all go back and take birth again. So we will be bootstrapped by one of the trusted issuers. We all have today the trusted identities in multiple places. Unfortunately, we cannot take any of those trusted identities anywhere. I have a trusted identity with my place of employment, my DMV, my medical center, my bank, passport office, you name it. There are multiple places where there are my trusted digital identities, my trusted identities, but I can't reuse anything anywhere. That's the problem. So how do you create an identity that will bring all these things together? And that's what we call a digital address. And that key, that's complicated cryptographic representation of you, we will also give you a user-friendly name that you can say from whichever service that you're generating that key from, or network from. That can be very simple user-friendly name at the network name. If you see here, we call it John Doe at DTX, DTX being the network service from the company that I'm part of and that I founded, which is called Digital Trust Networks. If you do this one, then you will be bringing real digital world close to real world, and you will be actually addressing the root cause, not treating the symptoms. The accountable digital identity, like I said, last 12 months, last 18 months, we have been hard at working on this one. We have a number of companies that are participating in this association. We have announced a specification called Accountable Digital Identity Specification, just starting off August. And we also announced a commercial implementation of that specification from the company that I founded, Digital Trust Networks. And it's also being piloted with the CVS, as you could find that from the press release that we made in August. So how do you actually do this? So when we actually tried to come up with what I just mentioned about how do you bring on the users, we felt that anybody who is offering such an identity service must adhere to 5 core principles. Like I said, we took an approach that we wanted to utilize all the great work that's done in the Decentralized State Foundation, the work that's being done at verifiable clients in W3C, the work that's being done, that has been done in self-sovereign identity. We actually took whatever is good from all of them. We did not, try to reinvent anything here. We did have a different approach of how you utilize those technologies and come up with architecture. So the principles that we have is anybody who implements the ADI specification offers a service to users and trusted issuers and service providers who wants to verify. They must not own anybody's personal data or personal identity. Second principle that we have is anytime when a user data is being disclosed to any service provider, the data, it should be done only with the consent of the user. If there is no consent, there's no disclosure. Third principle we have is personal identity data should remain where it belongs, or in the territory of where it belongs, to make sure that the user journey will become very, very easy. We wanted to include the issuers into the value chain. When I go to a particular university, when somebody wants to verify which university that I went to, I don't, it's not fair for a third-party aggregator to get benefit out of that from a background check, where they may or may not have the accurate information about me, because on LinkedIn or any social network, they try to get information about me, about my educational credentials. I may have lied. There is no way that they actually can go to my source of which university I went to check. So in this model, we will bring issuers, and we also want to compensate them. Every effort that I've seen in my research across for about 6 months that I did, every effort that is there is all about somebody having a smart device and people who are technologically savvy. What we felt was, when we are trying to fix this digital identity problem, let's fix for everybody. There are close to 20% of the people who are outside the digital identity economy. Either they don't have a presentable identity or they're not technologically savvy. So what we felt was, let's go and fix the problem and make sure that we have included everybody in the digital identity ecosystem. And some of the side effects of that, particularly in cases of the governmental benefits, or if UN is trying to distribute some of the consignments when disaster hit areas, the people don't have a presentable identity. How do you include them in the ecosystem? Or how do you know those things are distributed to the people who actually are real human beings, not somebody that Ramesh has actually put some fake names there and then sold the goods to somebody like Safeway? So we want to make sure we actually come up with this ecosystem and architecture where we should be able to include even the people who are not technologically savvy. So with that, 5 principles, we actually created the ADA specification. And the architecture looks something like this. We want to make sure the architecture fits with the existing infrastructure where the people don't have to change anything. We wanted to make sure that we actually bring in, overlay this digital identity infrastructure without actually rewriting the applications or changing the infrastructure. We wanted to make sure that user behavior will remain and extend as it goes. If the person is technologically savvy, we will give him an app. If the person is not technologically savvy, we're going to give them a plastic smart card with the fingerprint included, where you can actually make sure that the identity is bound to the user. We wanted to make sure it's extremely easy for service providers to be able to, request the information that they need to, and user will have ability to just give the enough information that service provider is requesting. If you see this architecture, the middle layer that you see here is cloud. There will be various identity services that we call interchange. They offer this digital address service that I was mentioning about earlier, a digital address, a cryptographic representation that is bound to a user-friendly name. That service is offered by networks, just like what you have in the blockchain, where identity providers are providing you wallet, et cetera, et cetera. It's very same thing. It's a very similar service that's being offered by different interchanges in the ADI architecture. Now, on the left-hand side, you see the issuers. So there are, like I was mentioning earlier, there are trusted identities of us in various places. Every day, if you are between 5 ages between 5 and 21, you are going to a university or educational institution where they know who you are. They issue diplomas, they issue mark sheets, and you go to take classes every day. There is a trusted source of your identity. If you are between 22 to 64, at least in US, 64 is the retirement age, and people like me may not actually ever retire. There is a workplace where there is a trusted identity. Financial institution, all of us deal with financial institutions to put our money, and to file our taxes. Those places already know who we are, and we have driver's licensing authority who issue driver's license, our passport agencies, our medical facilities, pharmacy that you go to, physician that you go to, a radiology lab, a diagnostics lab, a blood report testing lab. All these places, they actually make sure that when they give a report back to you, they have a trusted identity. So why can't we use any one of them to actually bootstrap the user, create the cryptographic representation, and bring you on board into the ecosystem? And all they need to do is just call 2 APIs. They don't need to change any infrastructure, because all these sources know your first name, last name, date of birth, your national identity number or social security number, whatever it is, the location, the place of the country, and you know who the issuer is. So what you do is, that specification says, on the left-hand side, any of the issuers can actually take those 5-6 fields as per the ADI specification and then hash them together. We don't get any personal information from any issuer. When issuer wants to onboard you and create a cryptographic representation of you, they take those attributes of you that are specific to you, that uniquely identifies you, and hash them together and pass them through the issuer agent, pass them to the digital identity interchange, and say, hey, have you found this characteristic before? And the identity services, different networks, will look into the same directory service within a given region, because in US, that uniqueness may come from social security number. In Europe, that uniqueness might come from citizen identity. In Japan, it might come from my number. In India, it might come from Aadhaar identity. Within a given region, there is a unique identifier for you that is government has actually issued to you. So we actually look into a local directory service, which is again a distributed ledger, not owned by anybody. It's operated by ADI, to see if this particular characteristic has created a digital address before. And the directory services looks at it, that hash, and see if it's available, if it's created before. If not, they will actually generate a cryptographic representation of you through a consensus algorithm. Like I said, this is a DLT. And then that cryptographic key gets passed back to the issuer to be delivered to the user as that digital birth certificate or a digital address. User then takes that key and then binds it with the service using FIDO. That way, nobody else can claim that except you. Nobody else can authenticate with that identity but you. So you create that representation, bind it. It is created by a trusted issuer, just like your birth certificate. It is given to you. Behind that, there is a human being, that is you. Now you have a cryptographic representation. After the digital address is created, all these places, they can now start issuing any credential for you. That could be an identity credential or it could be data credential. In case of a employment, they can issue an employee credential to you that you work for that company between such and such date, and that's your title, etc., etc. They can also issue a data credential for you, for which means they can issue a paycheck to you every 2 weeks. They can issue a W-2 end of the year. All those things now, data credentials, all they need to do is actually, like I was mentioning on the left-hand side, just two APIs. They don't need to change any of the infrastructure. Then once they issue that either identity credential or verifiable credential gets converted from the data elements in the trusted places, converts them into a verifiable claim as per the W3C specification. And that is stored in the issuer agent. That could be the issuer or it could be the service. It doesn't matter. Now, then a decentralized identifier will be created for that particular verifiable credential, and that gets written into the DLT that is next to the interchange service, just the metadata and a decentralized identifier that connects you back to the PC. Now, here in the distributed ledger, you have a series of metadata which will actually describe all the identity credentials and data credentials that are issued to you by trusted issuers, and pointers, decentralized identifiers, that takes you back to the verifiable credential. Users' digital address application app can simply synchronize with that particular metadata. Now, phone will have all the links and the metadata that user owns. If the person is not technologically savvy, we will actually be able to create the digital identity to this card and bind it with FIDO2 with the user to the service. If you're a farmer who's not technologically savvy, you don't have a smartphone, you can simply take this and just tap it on the kiosk application, which is a digital identity front end. Then it brings back all the things that you own. Then you can pick and choose what you want to provide to the service provider very, very easily. Service providers on the right-hand side can simply demand what they want to know about the user. Like, for instance, if I could go to a social network, if I want to create an account, next thing before I goes and submits and register, it asks me, prove me you are Ramesh. And then I can say, I have a driver's license and I have an employment credential. Which one do you want? Service provider can pick what he wants, and the data will be credited, issued, and the assertion will be provided. Service provider can take the necessary action. It's extremely easy for integration. It's extremely easy to use. Most important thing, if you see how this architecture comes and how this ecosystem works, is these interchanges will have to implement their service as per the ADI specification under ADI governance rules. Both are available online on ADI specification, adiassociation.org. Please take a look at it. Now, these interchanges, once they develop the code as per the specification, they go through a certification process through ADI Association. Once they meet all the criteria, they can start offering the service. When they are authorized to start offering service, this interchange gets added to this directory service as a trusted network provider. Once this trusted network provider is authorized, the network provider is the one who is going to go to various issuers or various enterprises who want to be part of the ecosystem. They will do the initial vetting and also the governance principles to make sure the issuers are properly vetted and they are actually registered to the directory service. And the credentials, how they issue, what is the assurance level, is all going to be defined in part of the governance and the issuer credential that is issued by the different issuers. Issuers now are registered into the directory service. Similarly, service providers, they can be on any interchange provider that is sitting in the middle. They all get registered here. Now, you have a network, and the users, their identities and their onboarding is done by a trusted issuer. If you see the network and governance, these are actually trusted and vetted. Issuers are trusted and vetted by the interchange. Users are onboarded by the issuers onto the interchange. There is trust at every level. When the user tries to disclose his information to any service provider, user consents to what information that he wants to provide. Service provider or the user or the issuer, they only have to connect to one network. They don't have to have 20 different wallets, 20 different networks. They don't need it. Only one place they need to go get this within a given region. If you have 2 regions, 2 passports, you have the flexibility to get 2 different identities because you will have 2 unique identifiers who you are identified in 2 different regions. Or you can use one digital address to get the second credential from the different country also be issued to the first interchange or first digital address service if you want to make your life simple. The key thing, like I was mentioning earlier, was how do you make users' life extremely simple is one of the main things we looked at when we came up with this architecture. How do you actually bring enterprises into this ecosystem without changing infrastructure or without rewriting any of the applications? These are the considerations that we have, in addition to protecting security, privacy, but bringing in trust and accountability. Those are at a high level, some of the things that we kept in mind is it should be extremely easy for user to use it, whether you're technologically savvy or not. You shouldn't have, if you have 3 devices, you shouldn't go and repeat, of getting different credentials to your phone different times from different issuers. Want to make sure that's easy and simple. Issuers are simply, are onboarded onto the ecosystem simply with the 2 APIs. And these are some of the principles that were used to bring up this ecosystem. And now, any of the segments can actually onboard you. And any other segment will be able to actually utilize that identity seamlessly to form a global identity network, where when I go from here to Paris and try to check in 6 different hotels in 6 different European countries while I'm in business travel, I don't have to drop copies of passports in 6 different locations and give them pages of my passport. I can simply say, here is my digital address, go get it. And I don't have to give my physical address to anybody. The only people who need to know my physical address of my home is simply the people who deliver packages to me. Any vendor that I buy stuff from digital world, they really don't know. They don't need to know where I live. All they need to know, packet needs to be shipped. The person who needs to know is the person who actually delivers that. So you actually bring extreme privacy and security and also provide accountability. Like I was mentioning, everybody in the ecosystem is trusted and everybody is accountable. If an issuer tries to issue fake university diplomas or fake driver's licenses, they will be held accountable because they know that interchanges know which is the exact issuer that is providing that. So as long as the user is dealing simply with a one-time DITs and using decentralized identifiers, as long as there is no problem, you will maintain absolute privacy. If there is a fraud under the right legal framework from the cryptographic representation of you, you can actually go back and we can see which issuer actually created that. And that issuer knows for whom that graphic representation is created. And you will be able to hold the person accountable who actually, like, for instance, a misinformation, disinformation that is spread by somebody. They're only putting that because they are not traceable. If we can actually make sure, it's not like we can fix every problem there, but at least we can say if there is a content, if there is a flag there which says ADI, then you know that information is trustable, because most of us actually on the internet and digital world, if we know that we will be held accountable, our behavior will be different, just like in the real world. And that doesn't mean we need to, compromise our security and privacy. We can actually all of them together. And that's what ADI is trying to do. That's what ADI brings to the picture. We want to make sure we also know that this is not going to be done by one network. There will be multiple networks, multiple regions, because of the GDPR issues, local data issues, government regulations. There will be different networks who offer these services to different countries. All of them have come together. We have defined interoperability framework, easy recovery for the users. We support different form factors. All those things have been considered. And we also want to make sure this actually, fits with the existing infrastructure. So with that, I'm going to close my presentation. I hope this is helpful. And if you guys want to reach us, please take a look at adiassociation.org. Thank you so much.